and it just felt weird to have to go ahead and just spend all that money and just go down to zero. I was like, I was so used. You get so used to like grinding every week, and you're just trying to Khalil Herbert comes to mind. Like he was a pickup when Montgomery went down, and that worked out. So it was just kind of like every week I felt like I was like streaming running backs.
Oh yeah, definitely. And this was actually a kind of a good year, I thought, to stream at running back. I mean, I had a little bit more success with it than some years that we've done it.
Yeah, there was if you were going to come up with every year, I kind of like to do like an all waiver wire team. This year it might not be as impressive, but if you look at like RB2 collectively, actually RB1 and RB2 would be Elijah Mitchell and Cordero Patterson, but if you put up like a flex collectively, you'd have all these running backs that gave you like 4 weeks, and that was I think it was, you guys are both spot on. It was like a weird year for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, for sure. All right. Well, we've been live for a couple minutes. As soon as Nelson started talking about having anxiety, I was totally relating to that. So I had to go live because I was sitting there doing the same thing. You've got $5, $8, $9, $10, whatever it is in leagues, and you're just like, okay, how can I spend this and get maximum effect? And then you come off of that, and then you come into a week 15 that's just a bloodbath. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're gonna roll the intro here, and then we'll get into the show for real.
Goat District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
All right, welcome everybody. We are here live with the one and only franchise 12, Nelson Sousa, and we've already been. We started the conversation a few minutes ago. I gotta confess, we did a little bit before the intro, but Nelson, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you on, and looking forward to chopping it up with you.
No, thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nelson, if you don't know who Nelson is, you probably haven't been listening to the GOAT District for too long, because his name has come up many times throughout the course of the show. He's well known in the high stakes world as one of the absolute top dogs. I mean, if I'm naming even my top three, Nelson's right there. I'm never going to try to name the top one, because that's going to cause fights. But it's there's no doubt that Nelson's right in that conversation for all of that, and for sure within the top three. So, and Nelson is currently leading the Roto World or Roto Wire online challenge on the NFFC. He's 5 points clear of second place, which doesn't seem like a lot, but after the bloodbath that this last week was, I mean, sitting up at the top of that leaderboard has got to feel just absolutely fantastic. So, welcome, Nelson, and what else you got going on fantasy football wise this year, and just kind of give us a little recap.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because it kind of feels like that one team was probably the only thing that did go right for me last week. I just I'm still more in shock of all the teams that disappointed and just how ugly last week was between players not playing because of COVID, and we had injuries and things like that, and then just under poor performances. It was the worst week by far. Obviously for me personally, it was the worst week, and that's bad timing. But I'm sure there was a lot of people out there that ended up having a bad week. You essentially needed to have Lamar Jackson team, which Theo and I, we had that, and you needed to pair him with Huntley. So when Lamar Jackson was out last week, you plug in Huntley, and he had a monster game, and then you needed to have one of those two tight end builds where you had Kelsey and Andrews together, and they kind of, you could have sustained a couple of single digit scores from other players with the monster games that those guys had.
Yeah, absolutely. It was it was a super weird week in that way. I was reading that as far as the Sunday slate of games goes, this was the fewest touchdowns since 1994. It certainly felt like it. 40 touchdowns on the Sunday slate. And I know it was a little bit of a smaller Sunday slate due to the, postponing some games. But, with buys, we have had Sunday slates that small as well, in the past. So, it's not like it's never happened before that we've had a slate that small. And to have that few touchdowns, and then like at least half of them were scored by, the backup tight end for Detroit, who I can't even remember what his name is. You got Duke Johnson coming out there and scoring 2, which I'm sure we all saw coming. And, it just on and on. I mean, you guys lived through it the same as we did. It was just, it was ugly and it was disheartening. And it seemed like a lot of the big name players that we count on just absolutely crashed and burned.
And we also had, it was such a tease to start the week out with the, the Chargers and Chiefs, where it's, if you have Kelsey, you're feeling fantastic. You have Tyreek Hill, you're feeling fantastic. Keenan Allen. And then, you feel great about how the weekend's going, and you kind of get to the point of the 1 o'clock games actually, kick off. And there wasn't any real late, guys out with COVID. You kind of knew what was going on. And then the games start, and it's just like, what is going on? And then you have the bailout game, the Sunday night game, where you have so much exposure to Tampa Bay. And then, Alvin Kamara for a lot of players like Dan and I on the team, we split. And it was just, you couldn't even believe how bad that game was for fantasy. So it was one of the craziest weeks. It was just nuts. It seems like it's been a wild season, and this was just like the exclamation point to it.
Yeah,
it's pretty gross.
Exactly. And Theo brings up a good point. A lot of the issue was with stacks. The stacks that got you there into the championship round were the very same stacks that absolutely failed us. If you were on a Dallas stack, it just wasn't good. If you were on Tampa stack, wasn't good. New England was, nobody was really stacking New England, but I know a lot of people were using their kicker in defense.
Even Arizona, with Kyler and James Conner. You figure against Detroit, you're pretty confident that Kyler's going to put up a good game. Connor's probably going to have a good game, and it was none of it. So I think that game probably kind of was the warning sign, because that was a 1 o'clock game, right?
Yep. Yeah. It was.
Yeah, that was early. Yep.
That was. I think that game there was kind of like the warning sign of like, oh shit, what the heck's happening here?
Yeah, definitely. So, while we're talking about it, obviously COVID has influenced our playoffs a lot more than any of us could have hoped. And I think, this is kind of what we all feared last year. And it didn't really ever happen last year. By the time we got to the playoffs, games were back on schedule and everything else. But then this year, it's, I assumed with, so many players vaccinated and everything that, that COVID would have a hard time getting its hold on any one team or anything like that. And that just wasn't the case at all. So, what are you doing, Nelson, with all the COVID issues going on in this playoffs and, injuries and everything else? Are you doing anything different than you were doing during most of the regular season as far as setting your lineups?
It's like survival mode, to be honest. Like I'm not doing anything special because the weeks that I feel like right now we need to have waivers and be able to pick up guys, we're not able to. So that stopped last week. So it's like I'm just trying to have healthy bodies on my rosters. I'm hoping and praying that guys don't go on the COVID list. Like, for example, last week I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, it looks like Lockett is out, and then I got news Waddle was out. Waddle is of my playoff teams remaining, he's a huge percentage, of those playoff teams. So all of a sudden I'm setting lineups and I'm like, all right, no Lockett, no Waddle. All of a sudden, when you have like main guys that you're counting in your lineup and you're taking out two of them right off the bat at wide receiver, and then you start looking at your bench and you're like, okay, this is not good. Looking at some of the bench options. So the only thing I can offer is like, I did feel like last week, because games were getting pushed back, like the Philly-Washington game and the Seahawks-Rams, I felt, and it just seemed like it was crazy because it seemed like there was a cluster of players, position players that were going on the COVID list every day as the week went on. So it was almost like hurry up and just, if you've got guys like, for example, the Saturday night game, Colts-Patriots, I have Stevenson on quite a few teams. And although it was a tough matchup and, I didn't feel great about it, I did like the fact that, Harris was out. I felt like they would stay competitive in that game. New England's got an elite, O-line that Stevenson might be able to grind out a decent game. So I played him over a bunch of players just for the simple fact that I was afraid of, listen, I convinced myself basically like, okay, it's Saturday night. Stevenson, I think on paper is a pretty good play, even though it was a tough defense. And I just convinced myself to just play him over pretty much everybody that I had that were going to play on, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, because I was looking at it as, let me just get the points out of him because I don't know, what's going to happen. I'm going to wait on a guy and then all of a sudden, he's going to come down with something.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I did kind of the same thing with Mike Williams on Thursday night. I'd look at my lineups, by Thursday it was real easy to see how the week was going. So, and at that point we didn't even know that they were going to be for sure pushing any games back, hoping they would, but we didn't know that. And, I looked at some of my leagues and I'm like, okay, if one more player goes down, if I don't play Mike Williams tonight, I'm going to be, starting some total scrub. So, even though I didn't like Mike Williams as well as, one of the players that I still had on my bench, I was just like, I think I probably better go ahead and start Mike Williams. And it's tough to make moves like that, because you feel like you're doing something that, you would never do in a normal week because it's just suboptimal. And, but all of a sudden you're just like, well, how can I preserve as many points as possible? And, that's one of the ways.
We're having to weigh things into our, start sit evaluations that you never ever thought you'd have to weigh into it. I mean, you think back to a normal stressful year where you get this late in the year and you might be between two guys for a flex spot and you go back and forth. And now it's like, let's play the guy with the Thursday game that has a guarantee of actually getting on the field. It's just nuts. I really hope that that this doesn't carry on into next season because it's a ridiculous way to compete for, big prizes in fantasy seasons. And you do like to see the, the best teams win especially in these contests, and not be a team where, maybe this guy had less of his studs go down to COVID than the team behind them. It's kind of an unfortunate thing, but I mean, here we are, and we're trying to do the best we can with it.
Yep, absolutely. And as far as this week upcoming, any thoughts on players you're probably going to end up playing? Like anybody from the Thursday game that was kind of an on the fence player that you might end up starting that you might not otherwise start?
Probably. Surprisingly, I actually ended up with some of my AJ Brown teams made the playoffs. I'm not sure how that happened, because usually when you lose one of your first 2 round, first or second round pick for a majority, I mean, he really didn't do anything all year long. And then even when he was in your lineup, I think you got one good week out of him. I think there was more bad weeks than good weeks. So he's probably a guy that I'm now sitting there looking at lineups, trying to decide if I'm going to go ahead and play him. And then I have a lot of Deontay Foreman. So he's another guy that I feel like it's, again, not the greatest matchup, but, he looks pretty good to me out there. He's been getting banged up in the game the last 2 weeks, and, coming off, and then it's like, oh, crap, you don't know if he's going to come back on, and then, ends up having a pretty good game last week. So he's probably a guy that I really got to make a decision on a lot of my teams, whether he's a good play, is he a safe play? I got to decide what my mindset is going to be. And I got to figure out if I'm going to try to be, use that as kind of like in general for all my teams, or if I'm going to, decide like, okay, this specific team, I'm going to be a little more aggressive, and I'm going to wait on some other players and then make those lineup calls. I was gradually going through, some of my lineups. I haven't dug in yet to really look at them and see what the matchups look like and everything. But I do know that Foreman was like that one guy that was sticking out that I got to make a decision on for a Thursday player.
Yep, makes sense. I don't really have that much Foreman. I've got more Jeff Wilson, and he's a guy I'm kind of having the same dilemma on. Because he really didn't look that good the first couple of weeks he played, but then last week, he started kind of putting it together a little bit. So, there are definitely teams where I'm weak at running back because of injuries or COVID, and I'm looking at him as being a not great option, but I'm not sure, unless I get some good news on a couple other players. I think, I might end up having to play him. He's
another tricky one, Dan, because Tennessee's actually been playing pretty good against the run lately. So it's tricky because he's going to get a decent workload. He's going to be out there. On Thursday, at least come game time. Right now, knock on wood, we're expecting him to be out there. But yeah, it's kind of weird where our mind, our thought process has shifted, where we're just kind of like, okay, he's a healthy body, and, do I plug him in rather than you're just looking, before, you're looking at, okay, you're choosing between 2 or 3 guys, and it's all about, matchup and who do you think has the most upside. And I think last week kind of scarred us a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think, you kind of had a good point too, Nelson, about just looking at it team specific, where's the team in the standings, who's available on that team, and just, you have to figure out how to play it team by team. There's no one blanket answer that's going to work for every team. I have a couple teams that are, I hate to say any team is out of it, given the wild, way that last week went. It's, even if you're sitting well back, you could have the good week, and then the other teams that had a great week last week could have a bad week. But, it's a little bit tougher to see those going. So if you're up near the top, I think those are the ones you really want to concentrate on, and then think about the other ones a little bit more as you have time.
I think that's a great call, Dan. You have to prioritize which teams are realistically, are a threat and which ones are not. And I think that's also a big thing for home leaguers as well. I had a question, Nelson. If this is more of a home leaguers that still have waivers and that sort of thing, how do you handle a start your studs versus red hot players that we see every single year? We see some of these guys catch fire. Maybe, how would you weigh out like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, a Gabe Davis, some of these ascending wide receivers that are a little bit hot versus maybe a wide receiver that is, a perceived wide receiver 2 type? Do you start looking for the hotter guys, or do you kind of go back to and look at matchups? I mean, how would you weigh something like that? And I don't really have a good start sit for them against, but, like a Terry McLaurin versus a Gabe Davis versus an Amon-Ra St. Brown, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question, because what I can say is, through the years, I haven't been afraid of being wrong. So, like even, this year at FTN, we're on the Discord chat, and we're talking about, before Thursday game and the Sunday games, and, guys are asking lineup questions that, they've got some difficult questions, which, is great, because that means they built, quality depth on their bench throughout the year. But I'm not afraid to, start a store brand name versus, the normal guy like McLaurin, for example. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown right now is hot, and I believe in that. I believe that players go through stretches where they're on fire. Like before he got hurt, Elijah Moore was on fire, and he was a guy that you had to like wrap your head around it and have the mindset that, hey, you got to play this guy over some other players that you normally wouldn't, because he is hot. It was the same thing, beginning of the year with Mike Williams. You drafted Mike Williams probably in the 10th round, somewhere around there, and he started off on fire, and you're looking at it and you're like, wait a minute, this is a top 12 wide receiver right now. Like I can't keep just putting him on the bench and watching those 20-point games, out of my lineup. So yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the matchup, but that's definitely something that I consider. I try not to get too cute. Like I believe in, like, start your studs. But there's got to be a valid reason why you're not going to start a guy. I don't like getting, too cute with stuff where it's like, Amon-Ra St. Brown versus, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of like Deontay Johnson. That would be one. Like I feel like that's just getting too cute. You're playing Deontay Johnson. He's getting like whatever it is, like a 30% target share. He's got tremendous upside. He's coming off a bad game, and St. Brown's coming off a great game, but that's the kind of like it's those kind of things that if you start getting cute and like feeling like now that's a conversation that you need to have, you're going to drive yourself crazy, and you're probably going to not have much success throughout the year.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and a lot of it kind of depends on how that, that better player, the player that you drafted higher, however you want to put it, how they've been playing of late. Like, for me, Deontay Johnson versus Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't really much of a difficult call, for the same reason. It's just, you got to, Deontay Johnson's been working all year basically. But then you look at somebody like Amari Cooper, and now all of a sudden in my mind, I'm starting to think a little bit more because, he just hasn't, Dallas has not been doing well of late. His last 5-6 games, he's had one decent game. And, so then all of a sudden it's like, what do I do here? And, I think, again, you have to kind of weigh the matchups and think about, the upside and how bad you need it, if you just need a comfortable score because you're in your league playoffs and you feel like you can beat the other team, maybe you go ahead and start Cooper. But I'm a big believer in, if don't try to find the easiest loss or the friendliest loss. And when you're playing in championship runs, of all the big contests, and anything other than, basically swinging for the fences is going to be a problem. It's not going to help you out. I mean, you don't want to take crazy chances, but on the other hand, if you feel like one player has upside and the other one doesn't, you're going to play the player with upside most of the time. How do you feel about that, Nelson?
I agree. I mean, we saw kind of like an example of it where, with Dalvin Cook a week ago, where it was a Thursday night game and people were really, concerned with how effective he was going to be because he was basically like questionable going into the game. But you see it in the Discord chat at FTN, Dan, where guys were asking questions, and it was like a legit question of okay, Dalvin or Madison, who we playing, and I looked at it as like, listen, I don't have stats to back it up. I was going off of memory, and I said to them that anytime Dalvin's been banged up and he's gone into a game questionable and then he's been active, there is no like Darrell Henderson, Sony Michel type of treatment where he just sits, on the sideline and watches Alexander Madison, run with the ball. It's always been, it's Dalvin's game. So yeah, he could get hurt. He could re-aggravate his shoulder injury and you're done. It could be in the first quarter, could be in the third quarter, but I think that's a situation where you got to play your guy, at that point. So I think this week we had another one. What was it this week? I want to say there was like another question on a guy, whether, to play him or not.
We had it was Gabe Davis and Amon Ra.
You're saying for this week coming up, like that question. I was talking like as far as like a top player, versus like a top player struggling, like Amari Cooper, for example. It was last week was Eckler, again, Thursday night game, and it was a guy, coming in questionable. There was even, a report out there that said that Eckler was going to see limited snaps, which he was, he did. But that was like another situation where I don't know if there's anything you can do other than just off of feel. So I looked at it as like I played Eckler 100%. So where I had him, I rode him all year. He was active. I knew he was going to be limited. I knew he wasn't 100%, but I'm like, damn, I'm not going to pull a Dalvin and, play Madison or place, someone else and watch, Eckler, run for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I'm going to be sitting there crying on Thursday night. I'm just going to play him. So, and he ended up, he probably could have ended up with a bigger game actually, based on his usage. Cause I questioned, Staley not using him around the goal line. I felt like if there was anything, it was going to be a lot of third down, and it was going to be, once they got in the red zone, it was going to be him, and he's not off the field. And, it was kind of like a, told you so moment when like Josh Kelly, fumbled at the goal line. It's like, what are you doing? Like, all of Eckler's touchdowns this year have been in the red zone, I believe. So it's like, he's been super efficient, and reliable. Why, what are you doing? So he could have had an even bigger game. And I don't know if people, it sat him, but he was another guy. It was like, listen, if he's active, you're playing him. But Cooper, like, to Dan's point, not to like beat a dead horse, but like Amari Cooper is a whole different story. Like I look at, Dalvin Eckler, there was question marks like that, but then you have like McLaurin and Amari Cooper who have been struggling and haven't been playing well, and then they're also at the mercy of the quarterback throwing them the ball. So like McLaurin for sure, like that's an example of like I played Stevenson on Saturday in the flex over McLaurin just because it was like, okay, Washington's dealing with COVID issues. Who the heck is going to be throwing him the football? It's going to be Gilbert throwing him the football. I'll just take the whatever I can get out of Stevenson on Saturday night rather than waiting till Tuesday to play McLaurin. And then, Cooper's kind of in the same boat, like struggling right now. And I think it's open for debate on who you play over him.
Definitely. And, as we kind of transition off of that, are there any NFL teams that you really trust right now or any that you just absolutely don't trust right now? As far as like when you're setting your lineup, do you look at, players on a particular team and like, don't feel good about that?
I don't necessarily look at it as like, okay, these players are on these particular NFL teams, so I trust them. It's the opposite. It's kind of like, these guys are on, the Houston Texans. These guys are on the New York Giants. Bad coaching, just, on shitty teams, that's probably the guys that I would question more, that I wouldn't necessarily trust. And then just everyone else, I don't look at it as like, oh, okay, this guy's on the 49ers or this guy's on the Ravens. So, good coaching staff. I trust them. Like, I don't look at it that way, but definitely, if they're on a shitty team and, New York Jets, things like that, you never know what could happen. And even though like Amon-Ra St. Brown, for example, is doing, performing well, he's on a heater. And we see that's, to end the year sometimes with like young players where they just come on late. But like Detroit's another example of like 2 weeks ago, we had, Swift was out and Jamal Williams was on, I believe it was the COVID list, right? That was his reasoning or was it
Yes.
I think that's why he was out.
Pretty sure. Yep.
So you're sitting there and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Is it Jefferson time, this week or I'm going to butcher his name, but Ukubiku or
yeah. Yeah. I know who you're talking about. Igwebike or something.
Yeah.
We'll call him Godwin.
Godwin. Let's call him Godwin. So, so you're sitting there and you're like picking those guys up because you're like, all right, I'm going to play one of those. And they call up from the practice squad, Craig Reynolds, and he gets all the run. So like, that's an example of like a situation where it's like, you can't trust like the coaching staff, on teams that are, in the cellar, they're not playing for a playoff spot and they're getting a look at other players and guys like that. So, that would be my example of situations where you don't trust necessarily the team that the player's on.
I think that's a great point by Nelson. I think you see people making that mistake a lot where they're just chasing volume in a bad situation and they think that they've kind of got the situation figured out. But there's always so many question marks with the usage. A lot of these teams that maybe have nothing to play for or might want to get a look at a particular guy. I mean, it's kind of a dangerous game to try to predict these extremely crappy teams this time of year. It's like this Jacksonville versus Jets game is such a weird game, and it's just a hard game to predict a lot of stuff. And I don't want to see people trying to like use defenses and all that kind of stuff. I think it's better just to kind of stay away from these situations whenever you get an opportunity to.
Yeah, unless you've heard something specific, like the team wants to get a better look at player X or player Y, and you think they actually have a decent chance. This would be unlike Jake Fromm with the Giants. Even though we know the Giants wants to get a good look at him, I'm fine with the Giants getting a good look at him, but I don't want to look at him on my fantasy team. Certainly not my starting lineup, and I probably don't want to look at any of his receivers either. So, those are all good points. And I think, kind of what I pulled out of what Nelson was saying is, we know who we don't trust, and who we do trust is going to, you eliminate all the ones you don't trust, and then look at the teams, that are left, and then figure out who you trust the most, or the players you trust the most, from those that you haven't already just said, no, I'm not touching this. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for sure.
What are your biggest lessons learned? Nelson, comes out with his fades list before the season. He's grinding hard. He's a very well prepared player. And he always seems to have a really good plan anytime you're in a draft against him. Or, for me, I got a chance to draft with Nelson this year on a couple of teams. What were your main lessons this year? Maybe some guys, you could touch on some of the real hits like the Taylors, Ecklers, Cups, Debos. What are your big lessons, from maybe your preparation and then your takeaways with how it all turned out?
Probably, lessons learned, like every year, there's always a couple of particular guys that stick out that, I get wrong. And then I try to, usually I don't necessarily worry about it during the season. It's kind of like you're aware of it, it happened, like, okay, this player sucks and I was wrong, but I probably focus more on that after the season's over. So after the fantasy season's over, I usually take like a week to decompress, start watching, NFL playoff games, and then I'll go back into our leagues and start looking. I go through all the draft boards and I pull up my rankings. So I have like a cheat sheet that's how I draft, and I look at how I ranked guys. I don't necessarily like, my cheat sheet is a little bit of a mix of ADP and how I feel where a guy should be ranked. So I do have some like aggressive, rankings sometimes. So I'll take a look at that and then try to figure out and diagnose like what went wrong and then what went right. And I'd probably say, like, for the most part, I think like the way I built my teams, I thought was like a good way to build it. A lot of my teams were just, it was kind of like it was hanging your hat on one running back, whether you call it a modified zero running back strategy or an anchor running back strategy. I'm not sure, but it was probably a running back in the first 2 rounds, and then 4 straight wide receivers, maybe a quarterback mixed in there. And then I would hammer, run it my RB2 and and hammer all the handcuff running backs. And that's kind of how I played it this year. It was a lot of like streaming my RB2. So like I was hoping, hang my hat on Taylor, Dalvin, Eckler, Najee Harris, so, some of those players, for example. And then I had, I wanted to have good wide receiver play. And for the most part, a lot, like 95% of my builds were a wide receiver in the flex. I very rarely would you look at my teams to start week one, and it had, like 3 running backs, and the third or fourth running back was in the flex. It was a lot of 4 wide receivers, all playing in the flex. Pushed back tight end. I wasn't into Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, Hawkinson, Pitts, all those guys. I mixed them in just because of the sheer volume that I did, but I was mostly, punting tight end. So that's kind of like the build. I felt like it was a successful regular season. We'll see how, the fantasy playoffs end up, but obviously, like last week, not having huge amount of exposure to Kelsey, wasn't ideal. Not having a huge amount of exposure to Andrews, not ideal. So those situations come up, and that's probably another thing that I might look at to end the season. Not something that I'm concentrating on right now, but I might look at that and see okay, what were the winning lineups? Who won the big, the top prizes in these tournaments, and what did their build look like? And taking that into account might change a little bit of my strategy for 2022 on, okay, well, you never know who's going to get hot in that 3-week sprint. So maybe I need to mix in, a few of these other players, even though that doesn't kind of fit my lineup build of how I was doing it.
That makes sense. And, do you mind if I go through your fade wide receivers from this year's fade list?
Yeah.
Because,
Go for it. Remind me how bad I did.
Okay. So I just pulled it up. So the first one we got to give you a mulligan on. That was Justin Jefferson. But then after that, it was Kenny Golladay, Will Fuller, Chase Claypool, Cortland Sutton, and Julio Jones. You got to feel pretty good about that list.
Yeah, no, it was solid for sure.
It's perfect. And that's, and that's the thing too. I mean, nobody's ever going to get 100%, on any fade list or, target list or anything like that. You're just, you're not going to hit 100%. None of us are that good. There's too many twists and turns to the fantasy season. But I mean, if you can bat, over 75% either way, I think that says something right there. So that was a nice job on that fade list. And if you're wondering what you ought to do next year, I mean, subscribing to Nelson's service. Are you going to be with FTN again, you think, next year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely be there.
Okay, excellent. Definitely well worthwhile. I know I've subscribed to it. Really enjoy the Discord, where it's a kind of a good chance to chat with other high stakes players and pick Nelson's brain straight up on different situations that your team might be facing, and you learn as much from just kind of listening in, I guess, a little bit to what some of the other players are doing. Sometimes just kind of reading through that help crystallize some things in my head. So it's a nice perk. So not only do you get Nelson's fade list and his target list, but you also get kind of a lot of one-on-one interaction where you can see how he's handling the season as it unfolds. So definitely well worthwhile.
And not just even, myself, but if you sign up for the whole package, we have at FTN, there's like some really sharp guys.
Yep.
Like Jeff Ratcliffe right now, I believe is number 1 with his fantasy rankings on the season. So like his rankings have been money. And that was kind of, as the season was going along, that's what I was telling the guys that, in the Discord chat is, hey guys, instead of, asking me, it's not me being lazy or not wanting to answer the questions, but go look at Jeff's, rankings and have that be your tiebreaker. And then if you feel like, hey, there's a guy listed at number 16 and another guy listed at number 19, and I feel like this is close, like, do you have a tiebreaker, Nelson? That's one thing, but definitely, taking advantage of that, because I mean, if he's been number one all year, why not, utilize his rankings and, just all the content that's on there. There's so much information, as far as like utilization and different things that you pick up on, because these guys, are doing their homework and digging deep. So you've got so much information at your fingertips that it's definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, I'll co-sign that. I also subscribe, and FTN we highly recommend to any Go District listeners. It'll help you win pretty much any league. And they also have good stuff for baseball with baseball upcoming. Hopefully we have a baseball season, but it's baseball upcoming as well. So we highly recommend an FTN subscription.
Yep, absolutely. A lot of good contributors there. So very worthwhile. Any changes you think to your league mixtures next year, Nelson? Like, are you going to go heavier on any contests, or do more best ball or less best ball, or anything like that? What are your thoughts as you're heading into 2022?
I haven't given it too much thought yet, but I'd probably say that I liked what I did this year. I'm a little, I'm a little tired from, the fab and the waiver wire process, because it's pretty extensive. And when you've got, over 150 teams, it turns into a full-time job every week. Especially, I never take, a week off. It's even though there's some weeks, I've got a family, I've got two boys, they're involved in sports. So, you got life, where you gotta, manage that and find and make sure that you're putting in the time, with your family. But it's like, so there's been probably a couple of weeks where it's like, oh man, I'd like to just, take a break and kind of, coast or kind of cheat this week. But, then the anxiety kicks in where it's like, no, I can't do that. Like, I'm missing out on something. Like, I can't do that. I got to make my teams better. I got to get rid of, I've got, two trash guys at the end of my bench that don't even belong on my roster. I got to get rid of them. I got to put I got to build the bid group, long enough so that I make sure I get rid of them. Cause there's been weeks throughout the season where there's like nothing really to pick up, and I'm just spending money for the sake of spending money basically on a player. So, I just go like $5 across the board because I'm just not feeling it with anyone, but I want to build it deep enough because I'm like, I know this player is going to go for over $100 and I want no part of that. So I know I'm not getting him, but I might as well put him in for $5, keep everybody honest in the league. And then, you got to build it long enough where, come Wednesday night, you're looking, you're like, shit, I didn't get rid of this guy and he's out for the season or whatever. So I'd probably say that right now, like I like the amount of teams that I did. Maybe some more isolated high stakes leagues. I might be interested in doing, and maybe cut back, on a couple of main events or online championships or something like that. Just I haven't really, that's just kind of off the top of my head. I haven't really given it much thought.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And, one of the things that's nice about those standalone leagues is you kind of play them a little bit differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't have to, the contest leagues we're always looking for the home run hit. But, and then also I just wanted to jump back on the, when you were talking about the waiver wire and not taking a week off, and I think that's really critical because, you can look at a particular week and say, well, there's nobody good, or, the players everybody else is interested in, I'm not really that interested in. And it's real easy to say, yeah, I'm just going to, take the week off. But that's kind of how you miss out on some of the guys like, a Donta Foreman, or, players like that you can get for $1. And, picking up those players for $1 is, to me, a lot more, the players I can pick up for $1 end up mattering a lot more than sometimes the players I can pick up for $500 or $600.
Yeah. Like thinking back throughout the season, there was definitely weeks where there was definitely like, one or two top players that were like the pickups of the week, like a must have.
Mm-hmm.
But after like those couple of players, it just kind of fell off. So a strategy of mine that I was using throughout the season, I was actually like picking up, sometimes it was the backup of the backup in the Thursday night game. So depending on what teams were playing on Thursday night, I would pick up the backup running back. Obviously, if he was available and it wasn't like a premium handcuff back that was already on rosters, I would pick him up and just kind of get a free look, essentially is how I treated it. Mm-hmm. And if there was I'm not sitting there watching the Thursday game rooting for an injury. I'm just doing it because I know injuries are part of the game. So I would make that pickup, and then on Saturday, okay, everything kind of, everyone got away from that game, uninjured. And then I would just drop that player and then, pick up a different player. So I use that strategy on a lot of my teams, where I kind of had like that one last, bench spot where I just kind of rotated.
Yep, exactly. And I think that's the key. Go ahead, Theo.
No, I think that, I'll just reiterate what Dan said, and just to harp on what Nelson's talking about, is we've had some of the best players in the country on the GOAT District since the summer, since, the spring, really. And, whether it's Nelson or Chad Schrader, Chris Vaccaro, B-Bag Batoba, the list goes on and on. We've had so many good ones. There isn't a single player on here that doesn't grind waivers. Dan grinds waivers. So it's, taking a week off is almost catastrophic. And you almost want to churn that bottom of your roster. You might think of a guy as, a guy you want to roster, and you almost might be better off, grabbing that next guy. Sometimes we underestimate the roles that guys take on. And like Nelson has said, sometimes the perception is there's a few, really hot guys this week. Whereas, maybe the fifth or sixth best addition might be the guy that really helps you for the rest of the year. I think back to, the Dalton Schultz type pickups, those kind of guys were so cheap. And, if you're just sitting there and waiting for something bigger to happen, you might miss out on those kind of guys. So, if you've been listening to GOAT District, listen to guys like Nelson, and, you've really, really got to attack your waiver wire. It's a grind, but when it's over, I think you really appreciate the hard work you put in.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And, you have to have, when you're doing your big bids, you don't really need much imagination. Everybody sees it. What's the appeal of this guy? But when you're doing the, down in the dollar player bin, that's where you kind of need have a little bit more imagination, a little bit more, what if, play out some scenarios in your mind and figure out, if things break a certain way, how would that benefit, who would that benefit, and are they available? Nelson was talking about, the Thursday night game. That's a perfect situation because you have an opportunity to, grab a player, look at him, and then dump him, and then grab somebody else, so it's like a 2-for-1 basically. You spend $2 and you spend your buck on your Thursday guy. And if he doesn't work out, you spend your buck on your Saturday guy. And if he doesn't work out, you're right back to it the next week. Unless there's some compelling reason to hang on to that player for another week or two. But you always want to have the guys at the bottom of your roster. If I think if you don't have, guys that you feel really confident about putting in your starting lineup, then everybody else has to be kind of fair game to cut and think about who might become that player that, you would feel willing to put in your starting lineup.
And guys, what's the worst number to end a waiver wire bid with? I'll pick both your brains on that. Is there ever one that nobody should ever throw out there?
I mean, I probably take it a little too far. Like, part of like my fab like process during the week is I go back and I look at previous bid history, for each particular league, and then I look at my league mates, the guys that I'm competing with, and I look at their bids and I try to see if there's like a pattern with like their bidding. And then I try to use that against, it sounds kind of, a little crazy, probably to some people, like, some of the listeners are probably like, okay, this guy's like off his rocker. I don't have time for this kind of micromanaging, but you pick up on some tendencies where guys, they're always using like that same, bid. But like, to answer your question, Theo, like I hate ending my bid with like a 9 or like an 8. So it's like a feel out process, but like, I feel like, I think like it's like a mental block for a lot of people. And they talk about this all the time, like in the restaurant business, like with like consumers and customers, like, okay, you can't put something for like $100. You got to put it as $99, right? And there's something there like mentally where people have like that block where it's like, well, I don't want to buy this for $105, but that's how you want to bid. That's how you want to think, because a lot of people, what you see like in the bid history, like throughout the leagues, go back and do this exercise when you're bored and have nothing else to do. But you go back and you see a lot of like 88s, a lot of like 77s. Sometimes you see like a guy going like 91, but like there's something like blocking them from like, I'm not going over $100. Like, I'm not breaking 100 for this guy. And like, for me, I look at it as like, if I feel like I want to bid in the 70s, 80s for this guy, I'll just go like, 107, 115. And I'm okay like spending over, going over by 30, bucks on the guy. But I'm almost certain once I've done my bid amounts and like 10 o'clock hits, 10 Eastern, I'm almost certain like I'm getting like certain players, because I know like from like the league bidding that, they're going to have trouble mentally going over that $100 threshold.
I think that's an awesome answer. And I think we appreciate that kind of, strategy, this deep strategy, people. And Darren Armani, Fantasy Mojo, was a guest of ours and was fantastic. He actually talked about what you talked about, where one of the most common things you see is the repeat numbers, where players, especially if you're playing high volume, you're going to go in and do 22 or 33 or some repeat number over and over again for your bid, just because it saves time. And I think Nelson brings up another point. I don't know the fantasy player who said it, but it made me laugh out loud, and I've kind of repeated it over the years. Friends don't let friends end waiver wire bids in a 9. It was just so perfect. And then I think Darren also talked about how you'll see zeros and you'll see 5s. So this might be very boring to some people, but I could talk about this for a long time. It's almost like the game theory in fantasy football, where you're talking about the actual play on the field, and then when we get to waiver wire bidding, it's a whole different beast where you're trying to figure out what number you can put get your player, but also not letting somebody get somebody too cheaply. I mean, it's a great thing. And I could talk about it for a long time, but we don't want to bore people too much. How
Yeah,
about you,
no,
Dan? What's your? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nelson.
No, that's the thing. That's what's part of the grind, and I'm sure like when you had, Chad on before on this show, I know from partnering up with him years ago, like he takes pride, in, grinding the waiver wire because at the end of the day, like you come out of your draft, your draft can take you only so far. And then as the season, grinds on, you some of your pickups throughout the year are going to have to make the difference, between winning and losing. And so I know that like stuff like this for like Chad is like, is big, so I'm sure he talked about that it's time well spent. It's excruciating pain, just mentally and physically, like it takes a toll like on you. Like for me, like I was explaining to like Billy on his show when we were talking about it, and it's like my process, like if this year, like if I don't start my bid groups by like Tuesday early afternoon, I'm not getting to all my teams. It's just if I do, I just half-assed it. Like I skipped through a lot of stuff, and I really didn't like put the time in. So like there's a lot of time committed to it, and if you put in what I'll say is like for the normal person, not psychos that are doing 100 plus teams, but for like the normal person that maybe does like a dozen teams, which is manageable, it's well worth it to spend the time and put in that work and look at those tendencies and things like that, because it could be the difference in picking up certain key players throughout the year.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And, as somebody who, doesn't always have time to really get in there and grind for, hours at a stretch on the waiver wire, the shortcut is basically you have to look at which teams and, that you really need a pickup on, and which guys you really need to pick up for that team. Like what are my most important teams and what are my most important bids, and focus on those first. I just kind of go through and I troll through all my teams quickly, figure out what's my needs, figure out who are the best players available. And, then I'll kind of dive in and research them. And then I'll go back and I'll do my, my dollar bids or $5 bids or whatever, adding to the list, as Nelson was saying, to make sure that I get somebody, but that lead bid, that's the one I put the time and effort into. And, and that's where I'll go back and I will look at bid history too and see, is there somebody who's, that I think is probably going to be my biggest competition for this player. Do they have some kind of a tell, do they always bid 8s or 9s or, anything like that? And you can pick up a few things like that. And I think also Nelson talking about, going over those mental hurdles, the $100 hurdle or $200 hurdle or whatever it happens to be, that's sound advice too, because you know what, if you get the player that really helps out your team, you're not going to care if you overpaid by 30 or 40 bucks. It's just not that big a deal, especially when you're talking about $1,000 budget. You can afford to make a few $30, $40 overpays.
Yeah, definitely. Like, part of my process is I listen like to the fantasy radio. I'm on Twitter and I'm just kind of like scouring for information from different, fantasy players, fantasy sites, analysts, and who are they talking up? So that kind of, what that does for me is it kind of tells me like who's going to be the hyped up player. Even like I might not agree on it, but it gives me an idea of like the price range of what, this player is going to go for. And then like listening to like on like Sirius XM radio, and listening to the various shows, in the morning or in the afternoon, who are they talking about? Like, usually like, the Monday after, a Sunday game. Let's say there was a couple of running backs that got banged up, or a handcuff, a backup running back had an 80-yard run for a touchdown, and now everyone's hyping him up, even though, he got limited touches, but it was kind of fluky that he got that touchdown. How much is he going to go for? So all that information, and then, being on Twitter, like, that helps me of like, okay, you know what? Everyone is going to be on this X player, and these couple of guys that I'm really interested on are going to fly under the radar. So, that's another thing that's kind of like part of my process is it's kind of like the stock market. It's like stocks, like where, you get people hyping up, certain stocks. So like they're going to go high, and you're like, okay, that's fine. Like keep buying it. I'm going to go with these under the radar players.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because, there's certain situations where you can just tell that there's going to be a player it's going to draw a lot of bids, and everybody's going to be putting their effort into trying to get that player, but there's an under the radar player that you really like that's, you think maybe even better. Like the classic one this year would be Adrian Peterson and Donta Foreman.
Yep.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to sound like a know-it-all. It's going to come off that way, but like that was something like, and Dan, you can attest to it from the Discord chat. And then looking at, kind of like my Fab notebook, I listed Adrian Peterson, and I'm like, I'm listing him here, and the price he's going to go for, he's not worth it because he's washed up. And I was warning people, that that's not the guy that we should be going after. We should be going after Foreman, who, at least he's got a little bit of juice and everything, and we'll see how it works out. But, that's what happens is like the mindset was like, well, they went out and got him after Henry went down, this veteran guy. So obviously they're going to run with him. But sometimes you just got to take a step back and not really, you can't follow the masses, or kind of like that, that big group think, thought process, with things like that. Sometimes you got to be kind of outside the box and think on your own and try to think logically, like, all right, Adrian Peterson is going to go for, $300 or something like that. I can't remember what he went for that week, but like once you get him on your team, like, what are you expecting? Like, what do you think you're going to get for production, out of him? And then that's where you're like, you know what, that $300 is better saved, and let me spend $25 on Foreman and make sure I secure him. And then, let's wait a couple of weeks and see what happens.
Yep, absolutely. I think super important. And for all of you out there listening, if this is your first time listening to the GOAT District, or if you haven't done it yet, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Both of those help us out immensely. So if you're liking what you're hearing and you haven't done that yet, please go ahead and do that. And just keep listening week after week. Check out our archive too. I mean, we've got a fantastic archive of some of the best high stakes players in the world, and so you can learn a lot just by when the season is over, just by going back and hitting those ones you missed. And then also make sure you're checking out some of our sponsors. Dynasty Depot is going to be cranking up in about less than a month. So if you're a Dynasty player, make sure you get on the Dynasty Depot. You're going to find teams that you can buy on there. You can sell Dynasty teams of yours. It's just the absolute best marketplace for buying and selling of Dynasty teams. And then, of course, be sure you're checking out the FFPC. They have a great playoff challenge going. If you don't have an FFPC account for some reason, hit me or Theo up or JD, and we'll help set you up with one and see if we can help you out a little bit with a little something on the top of it. So make sure you're doing those things, please. Help us get more listeners and more viewers. All right. How are we doing on time, Nelson? I do want to try to get a couple quick hitters, but I don't want to.
No, I'm free. I'm
Okay.
good.
No, yeah, our waivers are done. So
Yeah. No,
It's after 10 o'clock on a Wednesday, so it's like relaxation mode, right?
Yeah. No, this is relaxed mode for sure.
Yep. Yeah, and since Nelson does so many contest leagues, he barely has any waivers. I'm guessing just a few standalone league waivers to worry about this week, huh?
Nothing,
huh?
No,
Wow.
No, I had a couple of home leagues, back in the day, but they, my friends kicked me out of those home leagues, and they said I was, it's supposed to be fun and, trash talking and everything. And they felt like I was no fun. So I got banned from those, even though I'm still friends with all those guys. But yeah, it was all high stakes, and that ended a week ago. So,
all right, there you go. All right, well, let's go back. Hit a couple of reader questions, and we'll talk through a couple other situations that I think will be of interest to a lot of people. But one of them are our loyal listener Srikanth is wondering Everett, Higbee, or Conklin, which one for this week? And I think Higbee might be taking himself out of the situation still, because we don't know if he's going to be ready to go or not. He just went on the COVID list like Sunday or Monday.
Yeah.
So he might not even be available.
I haven't looked at matchups, to be honest. Who's Seattle and Minnesota playing?
So Minnesota plays the Rams, and
Seattle, Chicago.
Yes, that's it.
I'd probably go with Conklin.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm on Conklin as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good lean. He's more likely to be a part of the offense. We have to hope Kirk Cousins can pass for more than 79 yards this week. But speaking of performances that killed us, and not directly, it was just all the Justin Jefferson and all of that. You probably weren't starting Cousins in too many leagues, but Justin Jefferson for sure. Okay, and a defense one. Srikanth also asking KC or Green Bay. KC is playing
Pittsburgh.
Yep. And Green Bay is Cleveland.
Yeah, they're both good matchups, but I unless KC, really gets hammered with COVID and they're missing, a bunch of players like Cleveland was a week ago, I'd probably go with KC. I just think that Ben Roethlisberger just does not look good when he's out there throwing the ball. The offensive line is not that great. Kansas City's defense is playing really well, like the last 5 weeks. So I'd probably go with them. My thought process would be that Kansas City is probably going to be playing from ahead. I'm assuming what's the line there? It's probably Kansas City favored by, -5, -6.
I'm not sure. But we'll check that. And Srikanth also wants to say Nelson, he drafted Kylan Hill and Amon-Ra St. Brown because he were tipped before the season. And Kylan Hill didn't work out, but it might have if he hadn't gotten injured himself. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, that was one. If you managed to hold on to him long enough, he was definitely well worth it coming down the stretch here.
Yeah. Kylan Hill, unfortunately, it didn't look like he was going to get an opportunity anyway, even though, Aaron Jones got banged up there for a couple of weeks. Dylan was always going to be part of the plan. So that didn't work out. But, yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown was definitely a guy that I was high on in the preseason, and that happens. That's no fault of anybody. You know, Amon-Ra St. Brown with the Lions all year long was unplayable. You know, they were just, you know, they were rotating all those wide receivers. It was maddening. You know, you couldn't play any of them, any of those guys. Every week it was like Khalif Raymond. Then it was, you know, I'm trying to think of like some of the guys that they had on that roster. But it just felt like it was like every week there was like somebody new that was, you know, putting up a decent game, and then you had like Josh Reynolds, and now Amon-Ra St. Brown is coming on. So that happens. Like, you know, you drop guys because they're just not getting the opportunity.
Yeah. And on that note, I mean, that's a nice tip too for anybody who's, you know, looking at waivers. If you've got you know, a tight end that's important to the team and is heavily involved in the offense, and that tight end goes out, just do yourself a favor, go out and find the slot receiver for that team, see if they're available, and just pick them up. Because usually the tight ends are kind of tend to work the same area of the field as the slot receivers do. You know, they work them different ways, but you know, it's still kind of that underneath stuff and you know, intermediate range targets, things like that. You know, and we saw it with Hunter Renfrow coming on all of a sudden when Darren Waller goes out. You know, we saw it again with Hawkinson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So, you know, there's some good situations there. Just keep your eyes open for those. And then gotta ask Joey's question of Theo. Theo, is an advantage working the wire when you're doing the waiver wire article?
So I'll say that yes, in a way, because I have to kind of look at the entire picture and maybe get into it. I think last year, my article I was writing last year, I'd have to go a little bit deeper, where it was maybe more like what Nelson's writing about. So my article will have some guys that, you know, are you know, good and available for us in the high stakes leagues, where some of the guys I might be writing up are for maybe 16 team leaguers, where, you know, Nelson's writing an article where, you know, a lot of these guys are in the, you know, establish the run or player profiler, you know, Roto World. Some of those guys that are getting written about, you know, Nelson might not have to, you know, write even think about it all, because he's writing for a high stakes crowd. So for me, I'd say yes, because it's all about as much preparation. And then the only negative is it could be time I was doing for my own fab bids. So it's kind of like Monday's a big grind because I'm writing an article. I try to get it done during Monday Night Football so I don't miss anybody. And then I'm pretty much doing waivers, you know, all Monday and Tuesday. So it has its advantages and its disadvantages. How about you, Nelson? Do you think it helps your process writing it out, or does it kind of detract maybe a little bit from you know, your grind when you're putting in your bids?
I think from a timing standpoint, it takes away from, you know, actually like working on the teams and putting in the bid groups. But it is, to me, I found, you know, the last couple of years, like it's definitely important piece of the puzzle in being able to just put it all together. And then I'm putting my thoughts on paper and putting it on the site so that, you know, subscribers, they have, you know, rather than just listing, you know, these set of players with, you know, a bit of amount percentage, and that's it. I kind of give my thoughts on those players so that guys kind of have a feel for like going inside my head and what I'm thinking about these players. So I think putting those thoughts on paper helps me. It kind of keeps me in check. I'd probably say because like it keeps me from, I'm trying to figure out the right wording, but like it allows me to like process. It takes a time but it allows me to kind of process things a little bit. Whereas if I wasn't doing content and I was just, that was it. I was a high stakes player managing my own teams and that's it. I would be, I would get right to it and just start going through and putting, bid groups together. But I think that feel out process and that thought process and putting it on paper, I think helps.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. We've had a couple questions on AJ Brown. I know you briefly talked about him earlier in the show, but what's your confidence level in AJB if he plays?
Yeah. I've gone through my teams. Like I have like 10 teams that made it that has AJ Brown on it. So just going through them, unfortunately, like I feel bad, but I can't answer that this minute because I need to, for tomorrow to come, make sure he's active. And then that's kind of when I'm going to be able to like say, okay, what do I want to do here with AJ Brown? Because the reason why those teams made the playoffs without AJ Brown is because I obviously have like Cordarrelle Patterson, for example, that's kind of like taken his spot and his production in the lineup. I might have like Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I might have like some pretty good options, and then it becomes, okay, what am I going to do here? Like Jalen Waddle might be a guy that was like a core guy that AJ Brown was a bust for me, but Waddle has kind of taken on that production. So that's kind of like the decision I have to make. Just, running through those teams, I know those are the lineup calls, and I like mentally, like I haven't really like process it in my mind just yet. So I know it's a little bit of a cop out, but like, just trying to be fair. Like I haven't given it as enough thought yet.
I think that was a great question by Evan. Sorry to interrupt you, Dan, because we have that on the show sheet as well. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I find it refreshing when, when people say, you know what, I don't know yet. I haven't thought about it enough. It'd be nice if a lot of Twitter was that way, but
yeah, I try. I try not to give a half-ass answer. If I know, like in my mind, like okay, I haven't gone through the exercise yet to do it. Like, why am I going to give them some half-ass answer that I'm not even sure? And then I go through my teams, and then I tell them, yeah, play AJ Brown, and then I go through my teams tomorrow, and I'm like, oh no, I'm not playing AJ Brown anywhere.
Yeah. And this is another hidden advantage of subscribing to the FTN and getting on that Discord, because, as you're just kind of following through the Discord, one of the things that you can really tell is, like Nelson, when you're confident in a player, it's very obvious because, it just shows through, because you'll answer multiple questions, that are involving that player in some way or another. And, it's just real easy to see when you have a lot of confidence in that particular player. And then, with some of the other players where it's a little bit more nuanced, you might get asked, player X or player Z, player X or player B, player X or player D, player X or player F, and so you get to see kind of where, how are you, where are you slotting that player, versus several other players, better than these three, not as good as those two, whatever the case might be. But when you're trying to figure out how to make better lineup decisions, which, I think honestly, we all struggle with from time to time, just having somebody that you can bounce things off of, or just kind of see, what the thought process is a little bit more in detail definitely helps out.
Yeah, for sure. You bring up a good point, Dan. Like for me, like when I'm making like those lineup decisions, I'm going off of, at that point, and that's why I say like, hit me up over the weekend, don't hit me on a Tuesday or Wednesday. Cause like my brain is like in fab mode, it's like a light switch. Like it's fab mode until like 10 o'clock on Wednesday night. And then I start my process of, okay, what are the lineup calls here? And then as I'm going through my teams, and let's say I'm inserting like the kicker I just picked up on Wednesday night, and looking at whatever players I acquired, and I'm setting my lineup, I start now getting a feel for, okay, let's look up matchups. This wide receiver is going up against, the Chargers defense. They've been stingy, but X receivers going up against, Vikings pass defense, for example. I think they're like last in the league, for wide receivers. So like that would be like an example where I'm like, all right, I'm starting to feel this guy, and then I start getting a better feel for it. And that's why I tell guys, like, you're asking me on like a Wednesday, like you got to ask me, you got to wait till like Saturday night. And then that's when I can like really kind of pinpoint things. And then even sometimes, Dan, like there's certain guys, like it's a call between three players. And I'm like, I don't have a strong conviction on any particular player. Like I could see all three, I could see one outdoing the other very easily. And it's kind of like, a pick 'em, basically at that point. But definitely there's times where you'll know, like if I've got a strong conviction on a player that I want to play, and even though I've got like high exposure to him on all my teams, he'll go in the lineup, across the board, like an example was like during the season would probably be like Dearness Johnson, for example, was like a guy that kind of picked him up. It was kind of like a pickup when Hunt went down, and I want to say it was like Saturday. I decided to pick him up on a bunch of teams, even though Chubb was healthy and obviously he was going to get, most of the workload and everything. But he was a guy that like it ended up working out. And then it was kind of like the question of, okay, do you trust Dearness Johnson? Like who the hell is Dearness Johnson? Because now Chubb is out and Hunt's out, but like felt really confident, that he was the right play. I'm trying to remember the defense that they were going against. I want to say it was the Broncos. Was it the Broncos? They were playing on a Thursday night game. It like I vaguely remember it just because,
it was a Thursday night. I remember that. I can't remember who the defense was.
It was a Thursday night, and I want to say like the Broncos at that time on defense, they were dealing with like, I don't know if they were dealing with some type of injury, but like they were putting in like half-ass effort at the time. And I just remember like, I'm like, you know what? He's going in all my lineups. Like I've got him on like 70 plus teams. It was like, that's when it like gets scary, right? When you've got like 150 teams and you've got this one guy that becomes like your mind becomes an auto start. So you've got him in like 50% of your lineups and you're like, oh shit, like a lot could go wrong here.
Mm-hmm. It was Denver. And just to give you the stat line, that game, just so we can all remember a game that helped us all out, was 146 rushing and a touchdown. And he caught 2 passes for 22 yards. It was just like a magical start to the week. A fantastic game for Dearness. The Dearness Johnson game. We'll call it, historically, that is now the Dearness Johnson game.
Right. And that's one of those things too, where, if you can find that backup running back who's got that, that the clear path to the touches, and you're looking on the team and you're going, and who else even really is there? Demetric Felton, what is he going to do? And I know some people picked him up and they were thinking, well, he'll be their pass catcher. Well, but Cleveland ended up being kind of in control of that game, so they didn't really need a pass catcher. I mean, obviously we can come up with scenarios where it might have gone a different way, but like you say, you felt strongly that Cleveland was probably going to control that game, and so it was going to be a great game for Dearness Johnson.
But it does, that kind of call gets a little uneasy because like I'm making that call across 70 teams. That's a lot of equity going into that one player, and because I felt so confident, I'm on the FTN Discord chat, and guys are asking, hey Nelson, we all have Dearness Johnson, because you told us to pick him up. Are we starting him or this wide receiver, him and this player? And I'm like, okay, this is getting a little scary, because I'm going to tell these guys Dearness Johnson, and that's what we did. We went with Dearness Johnson on Thursday night, and I'm like, this could really backfire.
Yeah, definitely. One of our good friends, Austin Martin, he has a good way of putting it. He says, I have a Kia riding on this, as in like a small car.
Yeah. Yep.
No,
for sure.
And that's exactly what it is. I mean, you can call it a Kia, or you can call it a boat, or whatever it might be. But when it's a significant portion of your portfolio, whether your portfolio is $100 or $1,000 or $20,000, whatever, it doesn't matter. A significant portion is a significant portion, and you definitely feel uneasy about putting a lot on that.
Yeah.
So we talked about one AB, AJ Brown. Let's talk about another one. What's your expectations for Antonio Brown? Provided he comes back this week and next, is he a league winner?
So here's a guy that I'm probably going to have a little more conviction on than AJ Brown, and that's just because of the offense and the situation. So I own a lot of Antonio Brown because of my Tampa stacks, and I'm minus Godwin and most likely Evans this week. And from what I heard on the practice report from Bruce Arians, he was limited, but basically Arians said that he looked like AB before the injury, like he's back to normal. And so I'm looking at it as AB is going in all my lineups. And again, it's just a different situation where I'm looking at it. Tampa just lost two monster, targets, hogs in Godwin and Evans. And you got to figure those targets now. Like, I was joking around with Austin and Dave Hubbard. I was joking around with them and saying how AB, I would probably put the over under of 15 targets, this upcoming week, because I mean, it's him and Gronk. And then losing Fournette, Ronald Jones, I think Jones is going to be just fine. I think when he's had an opportunity, he looks explosive in those limited opportunities. So I think he'll be fine. But I definitely think, Brady does not trust Ronald Jones in the passing game. He's got stone hands. So, Lenny was getting, a huge amount of volume on those checkdowns. So I think what's going to happen the next 2 weeks is that Brady is going to be, it's going to be short passing game. And I just think that AB is going to get peppered with targets. So league winner, it's kind of a little bit of the get on the hype train. But I'm probably going with you, Theo, on that I feel like it's definitely a potential league winner just because of the missing players on offense and then what he's coming into. And he was already, a favorite target of Brady's. So I don't think it's this is not like a Tyler Johnson or Brashard Perryman type of situation where it's oh, okay, these are the next guys in line. AB coming in, he's going to be a target monster.
Yeah,
yep.
You also have to like the schedule and the fact that the Bucs are coming off of. I know these things are, it's a little more feel, but the fact that the Bucs struggled so mightily against their rival, and now they have a chance to get right against Carolina and the Jets and you get AB coming back into the fold. It's almost like a perfect storm situation for Antonio Brown. I'm actually really excited to see, how he finishes. What's your expectations, Dan, in that situation?
I mean, it's rare you see Tom Brady have 2 bad games in a row. So, that says a lot right there. And Antonio Brown was really kind of, in a way, running ahead of Godwin when everybody was healthy. So that also says something. So, I think if, as long as Antonio Brown is healthy, I've got him several places too, because I had a bunch of Tampa stacks, and I'm going to play him. Unfortunately, most of the teams I had Tampa stacks on are, looking a long way up at the standings at the other teams. But the only way you can get back in is to try to play those players that you think have the opportunity to have just smash weeks. So, yeah, he's going to be in there for me.
And I want to, just throw this disclaimer out there that obviously I need Antonio Brown on my teams, but this is not kind of like, the fan cheerleader on the sideline, let's go AB. I truly, unbiased opinion, I believe that AB makes a ton of sense. Like, he should be considered like almost like a lock in your lineup, just because of like those factors that we just talked about.
Right.
There's no SEC. There's no SEC for fantasy football or anything like that. You're allowed to pump the shit out of your own guys as much as you want. As much as you want, guys. No rules on that one.
Yeah, but he's also a guy, like, if you were playing DFS, he'd seriously consider in a cash lineup, for the exact same reasons. And that's, to me, that's like, I don't do a lot of DFS, but I do try to switch into DFS brain every once in a while when I'm setting my lineups. And, when I'm trying to determine, do I really like this guy, or do I like this guy just because I need to like this guy? Putting it into a DFS format and, saying, what, would I really feel comfortable putting this guy into my lineup? If I didn't have to, and that kind of helps clarify it at least a little bit for me.
So I wanted to quickly, we're gone over an hour and a half now. I want to quickly pick your brain on a couple of 2022 questions. Mark Andrews right now is the tight end 1 in terms of overall scoring and in terms of points per game. Is he our tight end 1 next season, heading into 2022?
No, probably not for me, because I mean he's had a great stretch here, and he's having a great year. But I mean, if like Kelsey, for example, I know he had obviously that monster game, and a lot of pro Kelsey, people out there were very happy to see that, but there was definitely a lot of bad games too from Kelsey before that blow up, and I think, like, I don't know, like, sometimes like age starts catching up to you, and I know he's premium of the premium, when it comes to his position at tight end, but a lot of people would be surprised. Like, I want to say he's 32 going on 33 by next year. So he's not a spring chicken. So I wouldn't even put him number 1. I'd probably say that it's between Kittle and Waller would probably be my 2 tight ends that I would probably rank, up there.
How about you, Dan?
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I'm high on Andrews, but now if Tyler Huntley is going to be his quarterback next year, then I'm all in on Mark Andrews.
For sure. And if, and if Dobbins and Edwards are out for the year again,
right,
and they go from a run-heavy team to a pass-heavy team, then I'm all in on Andrews. But I have a funny feeling that dynamic is going to switch next year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for me, I it's interesting. It's hard for me to kind of rank the tight ends at this point. I do think that there's a chance, like Nelson talked about, where the fact that we had, Travis Kelce getting a little older, and then we've had George Kittle now miss time back-to-back seasons, you might not see a tight end go at that 1-2 turn. You might get a little more value on the position as a whole. So no, I don't see Mark Andrews being my tight end 1 overall, and I don't think he'll be the tight end 1 overall in terms of ADP either. But I think he'll be right up towards the top, and he's definitely had a great season. Is there any rookies? Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, Theo. I was thinking it depends on what type of hype going into next draft season, what happens and everything. But I've got like this funny feeling that I'm probably going to be owning like a lot of Kyle Pitts next year.
Right.
Oh, I love that one, and that's a great segue. For our dynasty listeners, what rookies do you expect to take a big step forward in year 2? You've already said Kyle Pitts. Maybe you can elaborate on him, and if there's anybody else you see maybe taking that next big step. It might have been a guy who's flashed, or maybe a guy that you just were a little disappointed in this year that you think is ready to take a big leap next year.
Kyle Pitts, there you go. Like Kyle Pitts would be one of them. Where I want to say like he's actually had a pretty good year as a rookie when you look at his stats, but I think for the most part, the people that drafted Kyle Pitts are probably disappointed in him. And I don't have much Kyle Pitts. Like I drafted him a couple of times where he fell, and I thought it was a decent price to just get a little bit of exposure. But he was on my fade list this year, and I just felt like even though the guy's a freak and don't consider him, some people don't consider him a tight end. They look at him as a wide receiver. I still thought that the position he was going to play and what was going to, happen, his head was going to be spinning a little bit. And he wasn't going to have like that monster rookie season. So I was definitely, off of Kyle Pitts, but he's definitely a guy that next year I have a feeling that I'm probably going to have exposure to him, because if people, especially now to end the year, like he's not like he hasn't really done anything right the last few weeks so far. So if that continues, I think people are just going to be so down on him that he actually might be a value, and he might be that might be my target, like at tight end, depending where he goes in drafts. So he's a guy that I'm high on, for next year. And then trying to think other rookies. Jalen Waddle, I'm actually high on. He's had a really good rookie year, but I actually think that he could be better. So I think of him as kind of like a Justin Jefferson type, where he could just this year Miami's utilized him a lot around the line of scrimmage, and they haven't really taken any deep shots with him. And people forget, like coming out of the draft, he's one of the fastest players in last year's draft. So they never really utilized them. So if they open up that part of the playbook, with him, you could see a lot more of explosive plays and more touchdowns next year. So he would be another guy that I would be high on.
Yeah, I think that's a great call on Jalen Waddle. And I think when the season ends and people take a step back and look at the counting stats with him and his role on the team, he's the kind of guy that's going to rise up and up draft boards all summer long. It'll be very interesting to see where he settles in ADP wise in a format like the NFFC. He might be going a lot higher than a lot of people would think of it at this time. Dan, do you want to elaborate on what Nelson said, or is there any rookies you're really looking at that you expect to take a big step forward, or guys you're really going to be targeting? Take that any way you want.
Okay. Yeah, a couple guys I'm definitely going to be looking at with interest as far as like where their ADP ends up and potential great values. Michael Carter with the Jets and Elijah Moore. Both of them have exhibited some signs that look very promising. The one that's maybe likely to overheat that might be off of just because of price is Javonte Williams. Everybody's on Javonte Williams right now in the dynasty world. And if you have him, you can trade him for a lot. We'll just put it that way. And, but I agree with Nelson on Jalen Waddle too. I think that's that's a player that's just dripping with potential. And I'm glad I have him in several places. I am going to be holding him tight for sure.
Yeah, I like that call, Dan, on Elijah Moore. He was definitely a guy that I was interested in the preseason, and it took he suffered an injury in the preseason, so he was kind of he got off to a rough start, and then once he was healthy and they came off their bye week, it was kind of like they still weren't using him, like he wasn't getting full snaps, so it was kind of frustrating. I remember dropping him a little bit on a few teams, and then I picked him back up once I was like, okay, you can tell like they started using him. Corey Davis, was injured at that point, so it took some, it was kind of like rough start to the season because he was injured himself, but then it took like a Corey Davis injury for him to kind of take off and show like, hey, this kid's a playmaker. So I think like next year, like he should be, locked in and should have a good year.
Yeah, Elijah Moore was going to be who I was going to say. We're big fans of his on the GOAT District, and I do think that I'll see myself drafting a lot of Elijah Moore next year. I'm not quite sure where his ADP will settle, but I do think you'll get a discount on the fact that people still don't like having Jets on their team, especially after this season. And also, if it's Zach Wilson, I think that people are going to be very fearful of Wilson and having his number one wide receiver. So you'll get an elite talent who's 21 years old at a discount with Moore. And I think that with Wilson, I'm not a huge fan of his, but we all remember, Jared Goff's second year, how much he improved from his rookie year. So we have seen it before in the past. So I think you just got to bet on the talent. I'm also interested to see, Rondale Moore, how that wide receiver room shakes up in Arizona. He's kind of a funny player where, he's got the draft capital. He's flashed at times. The usage has been, not really there. But I think he's a dynamic talent, and he might be, a guy I'm looking at, next summer, trying to see where he settles in at. And flipping over to, you guys brought up Javonte Williams. That's a great call. You guys can take this question, either your top five heading into next season. We'll use NFFC scoring, NFFC rosters, or you can do it as your predicted top five in terms of what ADP will be. We can start either
Theo,
one. You can pick that one up.
Theo, wait a minute. So did you just mention Javonte Williams, and then in the next sentence you mentioned top five?
Are you
alluding to something here?
You have some analysts right now. Not to be named in other podcasts who are talking about Javonte Williams as high as number 2 overall in redraft. He is shooting up like you wouldn't believe. I think by the end of the summer, he's going to be. By the end of the summer, I'll predict ADP wise, he'll be in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean he might be a fade for me.
Yeah,
at that point.
Yeah, I mean
that sounds like a fade candidate right there.
Yeah, I think he's talented, so I'll start by saying that. But I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of factors. Is Melvin Gordon gone when we're saying that Javonte Williams? What are the factors in the variables? Like, are we saying that Javonte Williams is a top 2 pick, but Melvin Gordon has to be off the Denver roster?
I would assume that's the argument being made, and I agree with you. I mean, if you're telling me that I have to spend a top 5 pick to get Javonte Williams, I'm going to be out on that price. I do think at the 1-2 turn around there, it gets a little more interesting because he's flashed as a receiver. Basically, the argument that I heard was this is a double digit. He's giving you, 10 points receiving potentially every week. He'll be utilized as a receiver a lot in year 2, take a big step forward there. We've all seen him as a rusher. This is not the Theo Greminger rankings, but I do think that this train is coming where there's going to be a lot of players who really want to draft Javonte, as high as, 2, 3, 4, 5 in redraft. And it'll be interesting to see these early drafts. So I guess you guys are both out on that price.
Yeah, he could be a hype guy, for sure, and make it that far. But I'm thinking of players, in my top 5. I don't know. There's definitely a couple of running backs that I like, and then there's definitely a bunch of wide receivers where if I felt like I wasn't comfortable with the running backs there, I could easily take Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill. We could put Justin Jefferson into the conversation. There's quite a few players. Like Javonte Williams definitely wouldn't be in my top 5. Running backs, for example, like you got Taylor. I don't care about the whole injury thing. Like McCaffrey would still be in my top 5, even with the injuries the last couple of years. Eckler, Najee Harris. So there's I don't know. There's a bunch of players that could be in the conversation that you could easily make a top 10 and and maybe not include Javonte Williams. So I don't know. Yeah. I haven't. I might be out of the loop, on that. I haven't heard that hype yet on Williams. So that it's kind of catching me by surprise.
Yeah, in the dynasty circles, it's he is definitely the talk of the town. And it's kind of leaking into redraft a little bit too. But yeah, I think you made a good point, Nelson. To me, it'd almost be easier to come up with a top 10 than a top 5. Because Jonathan Taylor, obviously, for me, is the 101. And then all of a sudden, you're talking about several wide receivers, a few running backs, and exactly how those guys shake out it's a little bit tough to say right now. McCaffrey probably in there, Dalvin Cook probably in there for me. A healthy Derrick Henry is probably going to be in there. You don't have a huge ceiling, I think, with Henry, but the floor is unbelievably high. And sometimes with that first round pick, you're just looking to not screw yourself.
Yeah, I'm with you guys with most of those names. I think one thing will be interesting for me is, the Cup versus Tyreek Hill versus Devontae Adams versus Justin Jefferson, and kind of where they settle in, especially in NFFC ADP. Does the market kind of overcorrect itself for Cup? Where are we taking Cooper Kupp 2 overall? That seems a little high. Just for me, especially even coming off of such a historical year. But I think if I had to pick I think the number 1 is pretty easy. I think we could all kind of agree Jonathan Taylor is going to be the consensus number 1 pick next year in most formats. I think that, like you guys said, it's easier to do a top 10 because it's hard for me to pick 2 overall. 2 overall for me might be Eckler right now if I'm drafting tomorrow. And that seems a little crazy to take a guy that we were getting a little bit towards the second half of the first round, coming off his, a great season, but to take him 2 overall, it's a lot of thinking. And I think that, this time of year when we start pivoting over to best ball and dynasty, it's really great mental exercise, but it's difficult. It's very difficult at this point.
Yeah. I think with the Cup, Cooper Kupp debate is kind of like, I look at it as like when Adams broke out, it was obvious that he was the go-to guy for Rodgers and his favorite wide receiver. And I think what you're seeing is, people joke about the whole, going out to breakfast together, Stafford and Cup, and so like that was something back in the preseason. So it was like, they hit it off and they always had that rapport, and they're scheming him, open, very similar to what, Green Bay does with Adams. And like, he's just the go-to guy, Cup, I want to say, is like up there as like one of the most double teamed wide receivers, and he still gets it done, so it very similar to Adams. So like, I look at it as like, I don't think it's like a flash in the pan. I look at it as like, I think now with Stafford there in LA, like Cup is here to stay, I don't. So I think like he's like a super, super safe, high upside pick. If you take him in round one, I look at it as like very similar to like Devontae Adams' situation.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel real good about Cup. And he's not the type of player whose game is going to deteriorate very quickly. He's one of those that is more likely to hang around Antonio Brown style than to fade away Julio Jones style.
Very similar skill set to Adams, like not a burner, but like excellent route runner. And Adams, actually, his knock was like his hands at the beginning of his career, but like he's cleaned that up. Like he's got really good hands, and Cup has really good hands. So like, you factor in all those things, excellent route runner, got a coach that knows how to use them, versus like a Pete Carroll who has no idea how to use like DK Metcalf. And, you have a lot of coaches out there. It's kind of scary, but like for us guys who are like fantasy guys and think of things a little more like analytical, it's a little scary, seeing like watching some of these games and you're like, how are you, like, he's your best player. How are you not scheming him and getting the ball in his hands? I don't care that like the defense is trying to take him away. Like as a coach, like that's your job as an offensive coordinator, is to figure out how to get your best play. I get it. I know football. Like I've coached, with football. So like, I get it. Like they're trying to take away your best player. So let's beat them with our other guys. That's fine. Let them double team, our best player or whatever. But like at some point, you can't just allow teams to like do that week in and week out. You as a coach, like, okay, that was that game last week. This is what happened, and we just went away from it, and we just went to other guys, and we still won the game. But like, I'm staying up at night as an offensive coordinator. I'm like, how am I going to scheme my guy open? I've got to get the ball in his hands. I can't have, the blueprint. Like you're basically creating the blueprint of NFL defenses of like how to take away your main guy. And then once they have that and they realize, oh, no matter what, no matter we're taking him away, they have no interest in finding a way to get him open. Now let's figure out, once we've taken away their best weapon, how do we beat them by defending the rest of the offense, if that makes sense. So you're just making it easier on those teams in the NFL. So I look at it as like, I want to, there's a stat out there that like Adams and Cooper Kupp are like two of the highest owned wide receiver, not highest owned, two of the highest, wide receivers that get like double.
Let me find that for you, Nelson.
Yeah, they get like whether it's shadow coverage or like a safety over the top, that type of coverage. Like they're two of the highest wide receivers, but like week in and week out, they're still elite. Like they're still scoring touchdowns. Rodgers. Like I was watching like that Green Bay game last week, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, look at how they're setting it up with It was against Baltimore, right? And I'm watching. I'm like, this poor corner. Like it was like some young guy, like the backup or whatever. And you see the safety actually like go over to him and tap him on the thigh. Kind of basically, he was saying, he's like, hey, I'm over the top, okay? And they were basically going to double team him. So if Adams came in on a slant, like he had no shot, right? The problem was the kid, instead of like creating the outside leverage and not letting Adams, run, that slant to the sidelines, he let him do that. And I'm just watching Rodgers. I'm like, wait a minute. The safety is like, he's like too far back. And then I'm looking at the corner and I'm like, this is a fucking touchdown to Adams. And it was like so obvious, like Adams like set him up and then it was just like an easy throw like to the pylon. So like that's what I'm saying is like those plays, like they're coming in from LaFleur and Rodgers, the quarterback is making those calls in the huddle of like, I'm going to my go-to guy, at that point where some teams like last night's game, like you're watching like DK Metcalf and he's just running, he's on left side, right side, and just running routes down the sideline. It's like, man, this is brutal to watch. No create.
Yeah, it's terrible. And if you're looking for what Nelson's referencing, Dwayne McFarlane actually tweeted it. It's Devontae Adams leads the league in defensive coordinators designing double or help coverage on him. It's Devontae Adams, then DK Metcalf, then Cooper Kupp, then George Kittle, who's the only tight end on this list, Tyler Lockett, Terry McLaurin, A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, and Chase Claypool. And all of those guys saw this sort of coverage at least 22.3% of the time, which was Chase Claypool at the bottom.
Yep, definitely. And that's, when you're an offensive coordinator, if you can dictate to the defense what's going to happen rather than letting the defense dictate to you, I mean, that's the key. Every now and then a defense is going to, they're going to come up with a new wrinkle you haven't seen and, might work for a game. But, like Nelson was saying, your job is to figure out how to defeat that so that, the next team and the next team and the next team, when they try it, they have to go a different way because you've already figured out how to beat it.
And can we just all agree that Pete Carroll needs to go because it's so painful watching? I mean, watching DK Metcalf, and how many times all season long do they just run smoke for DK? You could run smoke for DK at the line of scrimmage and just let him do that twice a game, and everybody's feeling good in fantasy. And sorry,
Whoa.
Sorry about that. I got excited talking about Pete Carroll.
Theo got so excited he just launched.
Even the games where he smashed at the beginning of the season, he'd have like a 5-target smash game. It's just I can't stand Pete Carroll. All respect to the old Pete Carroll, but it's time for a new coach in Seattle for my DK Metcalf dynasty shares, especially.
Yep, for sure. Well, guys, we should probably get ourselves out of here. We're going to have to be welcoming Santa Claus to the broadcast as well. But thank you, Nelson, for your time. You've been more than generous. I mean, we're a little bit over 2 hours here, which is but it was fantastic content. It felt like not even half that time. So a lot of fun. Let's get out here with Nelson. Plug anything you want, and we'll get Theo to do the same, and we'll sign out of here.
No, just like I said, I'm really excited working with at FTN, and that's a big part of my thing. Besides being a fantasy player, is I enjoy helping others. So I feel like I am talented enough and blessed enough to have done well in fantasy football, and I feel like that I want to be able to kind of give back and I get enjoyment out of helping others. So people that want to get better at fantasy and want to win in 2022, I would definitely suggest for them to sign up, and it's not too late to sign up this year. If you guys are into like sports betting and DFS, there's a promo code FTN TV. that gives you 15% off of everything. So, sports betting and the DFS and everything else that comes with, what we have there.
All right. Good to know. And I can tell you the sports betting section of it is very good. I've used it before, and they've, like when I've gone out to Vegas to do the drafts, I always make sure that I'm hitting those guys up and finding out which games they're on, and I've done very, very well with it. So that's a great point. And Theo, and by the way, I did put the code up there on the screen. Is that correct there, Nelson?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
No, I just thank you to Nelson for coming back on. We've had him on before the season, and now towards the tail end, it was really great to have you and Chad back-to-back weeks. Some fantastic playoff information for people still competing, and I just want to wish a Merry Christmas to everyone listening on the GOAT District. We're almost at the end of the year. We've had a great run of shows, like Dan said. There's some great archive shows at this point that can help anybody out, and just good luck in your semifinals this week. It's exciting to be playing meaningful games in fantasy football this late in the year, no matter what league you're in. And we hope everybody crushes it and cashes some tickets.
Yep, absolutely. So again, thanks everybody for listening, and I'll echo what Theo said. If you're celebrating Christmas, Merry Christmas. If not, Happy holidays. Certainly hope everybody enjoys their time off, time with family, and definitely take time for family. Sometimes it seems like it's, like the last thing you want to do, but really, it's almost always worthwhile. And, if you can't do anything else, just take the holidays and try to improve your relationship with one family member. Find some way to just make that a little bit better. And if you do that every holiday, you're going to find pretty soon that the holidays are actually pretty fun and enjoyable. So with that, we're going to let you guys go, and thank you all for hanging with us.
GOAT District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.